Okay, how about we just get started now? Yeah, if more people come, I yeah, like if people arrive here later, I guess they can just like if they have questions, they can just ask in the chat or something. But yeah, so I'm just gonna screen share desktop. Okay, so basically what today, like for the previous 6 classes, we already learned everything that we can, right? Today is basically like a recap day, and we're not learning anything new exactly, but we're gonna finish making the website, which means that we can just basically it's good to review everything and practice a lot of times, and also you can see new ways that I do it because I have never actually practiced making this specific website before. I made a lot of websites of course, but for this specific website, I have never made it. And so this will be my first time and we'll just like solve all the problems and put everything there basically together. So it is good to like recap and do whatever. So yeah, let's just get started now. So first of all, find the folder that you have stored all of your files in. For most of you, probably it's on your desktop. So this is the folder. And you can just double click it to open it up in your file browser like this. And now, of course, you can see that we have all of the files we put it in it last time, which all of the images, and then we have the main HTML file, and then the CSS file. So great. Let's just click on this HTML file to open it up in the browser like we have been doing for like the past 6 weeks. Just like that. I'll see if it loads because it's kind of laggy. But yeah, you can see that we have this here. Great. Great. So let's just open it up in my text editor now. So we have opened it in the browser, so we now need to edit it. And what we can do is, of course, open Sublime Text by going to wherever you open it up. For example, mine is in my launch pad because I'm on macOS. And yeah, my computers are slightly slow today for some reason. But you can see when you open it up, it might go back to your previous one, or also it might just show you a blank screen. So what you are going to do is click on the top, that says File, and then Open, right? And then you open up the folder. For example, mine is on my desktop, so I just click the desktop and click dumplings to open it up. Great. So now I have all of the files you can see on the sidebar. And we're just going to do the index.html file, double click it to open it up, and also open the CSS file. So we're going to edit these two. You can see that now when we go back to our concept, right? This is not a website, this is just like an image. This concept image, we have a few things to fix on the header, right? For example, this isn't blue, but it's blurred background, but we'll do that a bit later. Let's just get the rough layout first. So great. The most obvious thing that I think we need to fix is this side social media button because this Twitter thing is way too big. You can see that when you scroll, it's like, because images are in their default size, right? So if you have a 4K image, it's going to make like 4,000 pixels wide, which you can see that when you do this, it's not that good. Okay, for people that missed last class, we're basically just making part of the website. You can of course ask in the Q&A, whatever say. But yeah, you can see that this image is really, really big. Yeah, so we're just going to get those done. Let's just head over to the HTML file and let's just find the place where we have the Twitter image and the email image. You can see that we already contained it in a div, but in order to select the specific div, what we need to do is basically give it a name, or as we have already known, called an ID. And we can give this ID something called, let's see, what should we call it? Contact, maybe, something like that. ID contact for like contact information. You can, of course, name it whatever you want. You just need to select the correct one. So in the CSS file, I just scroll all the way down and put it somewhere, I don't know, at the end. So now what we do is essentially press this, right? Add a pound number sign hashtag, and then type the name of the ID, which for me, is called contact. Is it contact or contacts? Let's see what I wrote. Yeah, contact. Okay, great. So now we just need to put these curly brackets, and inside we can, first of all, make div, which we will give it, for example, width. Let's see, width will be 40. And what we of course need a unit. The unit will be pixels, which is essentially right 1 pixel of the screen. You can have width 40, and height, we're just gonna leave it as nothing for now. And when you can see, if you reload, go back to the browser and reload, nothing really happens, and you can't really see where the div is. And that's perfectly normal, because by default, like divs and elements that are empty are basically transparent. They don't have background colors, they don't have anything. So we're gonna set a background color. So background color, and for now, we're gonna do red, like that. So background color, red, semicolon. And now let's go back and reload. And because we should probably be able to find our element somewhere. And now you can see that as I clearly haven't made this website before, I do not see it. And one way we can solve this problem is to open the web inspector, right? We have opened it up, like we learned it in the very first class or the second class. So we can just click on this and you can see that it opens up the inspector essentially. So this is essentially all of our code. And we can go and find where our stuff is. Right, great. So the div should be here. Did I not save the file? Maybe oh yeah, of course. I need to save the file with the background color for it to load. So great. Now you can see that we have this big red bar, and it is the same height as when you scroll down the 2 images. Now we need to select the images and make them basically the same size as the sidebar. And what we can do for that is pretty simple. We're not going to give it both an ID like Twitter as an email because that's not that good. What we can do is actually select everything inside of the contacts. So we can select all the images inside of the contact by doing this hashtag contact, just like that. But instead of just doing brackets right away, what we're going to do is also type img, so a space and then another tag. And what this means is essentially all of the images inside of the contact element. And now what we're going to do is width, like that. And you can see that we set this to be 40 pixels. So of course we want something that is slightly less than 40 pixels. So let's say 30, right? 30 pixels. And now if we save and reload, you can see that our 2 things are here, pretty nice. Great. Now what we're going to do is basically make this a little bit prettier looking by using a bit of padding, because you can see that for these 2 images, when you zoom in, they're kind of just touching the edge of it, and that is not good. So what we can do is give it a bit of padding, which is basically spacing around it. Yeah, in a little while, maybe 3 minutes, I can answer a bit of questions, but I'm just going to finish doing this part first. So padding 5 pixels of like a 5-unit padding. Let's see how that looks. And you can see that looks pretty good. Actually, something that I started to do is, because the images are this size, the content, right, it will automatically basically fit this size. So I don't think we actually need a width 40%. So if we reload, okay. So you can see that now it fits, now it's across the entire page. And that's probably because for contacts, like for divs, it basically says the entire page. So I guess we did need the width thing. But how about we use width Yeah, just 30, the same as the image. And then reload, you can see that we still have the padding because when you count make the width, it doesn't actually count the padding. So actually the entire width will be 40 pixels, including 5 padding on each side. So now we have that. What we're going to do is get rid of this awful background color of red and give it just a little bit of a border. So border is kind of like an outline, right? So you can say 1 pix, that's the thickness. And then this option is solid, right? 1 pix solid. And solid is basically like a line. You can also do like dashed or something, but we're looking for a solid line in this case. And then what we're going to do is we can, for now, just give it something like gray. 1 pixel border the width, the thickness of the border, and then solid, and then gray. So now if we press save and reload, you can see that now we have a line around it. Another thing that we're going to do is you can see that it's touching the edge, which is not good. What we can do is basically give it a bit of margin. So margin and padding are both spacing, but padding is the stuff inside of it. So inside of the border, the spacing between the border and the image, and margin is the spacing around it. So outside. So to demonstrate, I'm going to give it a margin of 10 pixels. And now if I save and reload, you can see that it's pushed out from the edge a bit. So that's nice. Great. And you can see in the concept image, I also made it like a bit rounded. And we can do that by using something called border radius. I don't know why it's called border radius. It should really be something like corner roundness or radius, but it's called border radius. And I'm going to give it something like 5 pixels, which is how round it is. So 5 pixels, and now save, go back to the browser, reload, and now you can see that it's nice and rounded. Great. So now let's look at everything else, essentially. For the ingredients, right, you can see that for now, it is basically the text goes from the left edge all the way to the right edge. And that is always not that good because you want some spacing, right? You don't want the user to constantly tilt their head and read around and to go back. It's easy to lose track. And for most websites, when you do this, it's always good to put it somewhere like in the middle, right? You can align it in the middle, and that's always good. So here's what we're going to do. Essentially, we're going to select the main tag. So the HTML, you can see the main, just to remind you what it is. It basically contains every single thing in here, like that. It contains everything, and yeah. So we're going to basically add a bit of spacing around it. And we're going to do that by using something called padding, right? So we can add a bit of padding. So we're going to select the main tag by just typing main and then brackets. And here we're going to do padding, colon, and we can do something like 50. So we can make a really big padding. And now if we save and reload, you can see that it's pushed to the edge, kind of. Great. And so, but for padding, we kind of, there's one thing that I want to do. I don't really want it to be just a bit of padding. When you resize the page, I want it to be the same width in the middle. So it doesn't get, it's not just a bit of spacing. I want it to be like in the middle. Now, of course, we can do that by giving it a bit more padding, but when you resize the page, it's going to get weird. And one thing that we can do is essentially set the width. Oh, somebody is trying to call me. Wait. Yeah, sorry. Width, we're going to do 800, right? We can give it a width of 800, which is the entire basically size of the page. And now if we save and reload, you can see that it touches the edge again, but we can open the Control-Shift-C to open the inspector. And when you inspect the main element, you can see that its width is actually only 800. It's calling me again. Wait. Right. So with 300, 800, and wait, wait. I'm just gonna inspect this, right? Main. My computer is a bit laggy, sorry. It's annoying. But main, yeah, you can see that now it basically reaches 800 and now at the side there's basically nothing. So if we make this a bit wider, you can see that it's still 800. I think that's actually a bit too much. How about we give it something like 450, 450. And now if we go here and reload, you can see that it's only this wide. But how do we place it in the center? There's actually a thing that we can do is called margin, right? If we give it a bit of margin, like let's say 50 pixels, it basically pushes it from the left side, but the width is still 400. So how do we put it in the middle with only margin? And it turns out what we can do is use a property called auto, which is really cool, right? For a lot of properties have like auto, which is probably like most times the default. And this basically just automatically knows to adjust the margin to place it in the center. So now if we reload, you can see that all of these is all in the center now. When you inspect the main, you can see that it's like this. That's great. So now we're basically done with the main layout of the web page. One thing that you might notice though is that you can see on the top, this logo thing, basically we need it to be on the left. And this is actually slightly tricky to do. But I believe we can find a way to do it. So first of all, what we need is the positioning. To contact right, we need to position it. By default, it's just laid out wherever it thinks it should be, right? Just like the flow of the page is pushed down in between the elements. But if we want to move it wherever we want, we would need something called position. So we use this for the header here to move it above the image, and we can do this here now. Position absolute, set it to be the absolute position relative to basically the view. And now at least you can see that it doesn't affect the ingredients anymore, but it's still here, which is not good. We can set the left property, right? So how far from the left of the screen, and we want it to be, let's say 40 pixels from the left of the screen. And now if we go back to the browser and reload, you can see it's nice and on the side. You can of course adjust the positioning however you want. Great. Okay, I'm just going to, yeah, someone asked to see the code. So I'm going to go here. So this is a code for the contact part of the CSS, right? So this is basically we set the width to be 30 pixels to make it a bit smaller, give it a border of 1 pix in solid gray, like that. And we give it a margin, which is a bit of spacing around it. But I think now we can actually remove the margin because the main container has a bit of padding already. So it's not touching the edge anymore. So we can just save and go here and reload. You can see it's a bit more to this side, but that's fine. So we don't need a margin. Border radius is basically the roundness, border 5 pix. Padding is the spacing inside of it, so between the image and the sidebar. And position absolute, which is for moving it, and left is left 40 pixels from the screen. If you mint the HTML, yeah, HTML. So HTML is very simple. We just have a div, which it's just a container element. It's like a default or basic element, which you can put stuff in. It does nothing except have stuff inside of it. And we just have 2 images, twitter.png and email.png. And these images don't come from nowhere. Of course, we just we put it in the folder that we have all of our files in. So here we have the HTML file, but we also have the email.png and twitter.png, just like that. Great. I think we can, if you have any more help, you need any more help, I can always get back to it. So we basically got the, I guess, very, very basic layout done. And now we just need to fix a few things essentially. First of all, one thing you might notice is that if you scroll, if you have the ability to scroll, because you can see that I don't have enough to demonstrate this, but let's just add some more placeholder text. And what we can do is essentially make a p tag and type whatever. But Sublime text actually has a very cool thing for placeholder text. You just need to type the thing lorem and press tab, and it automatically gives you the lorem if something like that. And we can type lorem again to give you a bit more. So now we should have about enough text to scroll. You can see that we kind of do. So I'm just going to copy and paste this very bad code in this placeholder text a few more times. Just type lorem and press tab. It will automatically give you more lines. Great. So here's what I'm trying to demonstrate. You can see that dumplings text, right? The dumplings text actually goes above the navbar, which is very not good. That's not what we expect. We want the navbar to be above everything. So here's what we do. In websites, you can see it's just a two-dimensional plane, but you can think of it as it's like 3D, right? 3D, when you look at it, essentially what it does is that basically there can be stuff on top of the other. And there's a property we can specify called the Z position kind of. And for this Z position, we can basically make it, right, like higher than everything, above everything. So like the topmost. So it's called Z index. You just need to type Z index tab. By default, everything is 1 or 0, I believe. We can give it something like very high, like 9,999. That should be above every single thing. And now you can see when you scroll, it goes under it pretty nice, the dumplings text. Right. There's a few more things that we should do. First of all, you can see that the image, it kind of, if you make the window pretty small, it kind of goes above everything. And we don't want that. We want it to be maybe something like 50% of the page at most, or 60% of the page. And so we kind of like want to crop it. And here's what we're going to do. So header, you can see for the header, we have position relative here. And we can also set the width kind of. So for width, if you want it to be, let's say, I'm just going to do a test, 300 pixels. I mean, not width. The width should be the same height as the height, right? We don't want it to be too tall or too, right? So now you can see it kind of does what we want, but the dumplings image, you can see it's kind of covering up everything. And that's because when like elements can stick out of the containers by default. So you can see that this is a header. Okay, this is a bad demonstration, but what I'm trying to show is that when you resize, you can see the image is sticking out of where the header should be. And what we can do is actually use a property called overflow. And overflow is essentially deciding how our elements overflow. By default, it's a show or something like that. We can set it to hidden. So basically it crops out everything that's sticking out of the thing. So now you can see we have this header basically pretty nice. So it doesn't really go above anything now. Great. For one more thing, we're going to do the navbar and make it actually look good. And now what we can do is essentially background color blue. We're going to change that, and we're going to change that to what? We're going to change it to a black color, but it has a bit of opacity, so it's not pure black, it's black, but slightly transparent. And we can actually do that using something called Rgba. So You probably have heard of what RGB is, basically how much red, how much blue, how much green something is. And then A is something called alpha, which is a fancy term for transparency. So you can give it 0, 0, 0. And essentially what that does is make it black. And for the transparency, we want it to be, I don't know, 10%. So we can do something like 0.1. So now if we save, you can see when we reload, you can see that it's transparent, but there's a slightly darker thing. Great. Now we need to do the nice background blur. And there's something called a backdrop filter, kind of like a background filter. So it's called a backdrop, right? Is it called background filter? I don't know. No, definitely backdrop filter. And we can set it to be blur 30 pixels and press save. And you can see that if I expect correctly, it doesn't do anything. And here's the problem. So for some browsers, it works, and for other browsers, it doesn't. And for Safari, it happens to be one of them that doesn't. It needs a special property made for Safari. And what it is let's just copy that and type dash WebKit. I believe this will make it work. So dash WebKit. WebKit is basically the Safari browser rendering thing. You don't need to really worry about it, but basically Chrome and Safari use the WebKit thing and Firefox uses something different. So I believe you had to prefix it with this. For most properties, you don't need to do this, but I guess it's a kind of like an experimental property. So now you can see when we do this, it has a very nice blur, right? It looks very cool. And right, so you can see that whenever we can scroll, all of the things in the background kind of blurs out like that nicely. But you can see for one thing now it's a bit hard to read. So I think we can adjust the background color not to 0.1, maybe 0.5. So it will be a bit darker, but still slightly transparent. So now if we reload, you can see that the color is a bit darker. It looks, you can still see the blur, but now we can read it a lot better. Great. One last thing we're going to do is of course remove the underlines, because for this links, I don't think it looks that good. So we can remove the underlines by going to the nav A, which we went over. You can see that with the spacing is all basically right. So it's all of the A tags or the links inside of the nav bar. And here we're going to do text declaration. And then we're going to type none. By default, it's something like underline for these, but we can do none. And now if we reload, let's see, you can see all of the things are gone. But this doesn't mean that you can't click on them. You can, of course, still click on them and it will still work. Great. So basically, yeah, here's all of the things and we're going to do. We can still change the font a little bit. So for one last thing, we're going to change the font. I mean, not the font, I mean, yeah, sure, the font, but also the background color. So for ours, we can go into a body, which is a background of the entire page. And we're going to give it a background color of, what is it? You can see that there's yellow, let's say light yellow. So you can use the RGB thing to do a precise color, but it also gives you a few names for things that you can do. There's tons of colors that it has. And this seems actually pretty nice. We're also going to do make this slightly brown so it's not a complete black color. So for text color, it's just called color. And we can give it something like brown. Shadow brown seems interesting. Let's just click the thing and see what color it is. Okay, yeah, that seems pretty good, but the brown color is a bit too light. We're going to just give it just normal brown. How about that? Let's see what that looks like. It's actually a bit red, so it's not the exact color I want. Let's just use RGB properties then. So brown is mostly kind of red, I believe, so you can give it something like 20. For green, you don't think of brown as green, but we're going to give it something like 10. And blue is slightly blue, let's give it 8. I got good at picking colors by just typing values. Let's just change this to 40, but mostly it's just a bit more experience when you're just typing a bunch of colors, and that seems maybe it's a bit too dark, but we're gonna leave it like that for now. Okay. So your image got a little, someone asked my image got a little smaller. You had to specify which image. Are you talking about like the side images or like the entire banner image? And also what we can do is, yeah, let's just change the font to be not, let's do something like 80, 20, and 20. How about that? Okay, yeah, your header image change to a square. I would have expected that. And one thing I guess advice I can give you is check if you select the image. Does your image have the property width 100% set on it? So the height of like it is very wide, right? So it touches the edges of the page. If you have that set, it should be fine. And you should also have overflow hidden set for the header. But yeah, great. One last thing that we can do is make this H1 a bit bigger and a bit better position. So we can type the H1 right here. We're going to do bottom is 80. I feel like that's a bit too high. We're going to do something like bottom 40. How about that? If the header is 300 pixels, I think it's also a bit too small. Let's say change it to 500 pixels. Header 500. And let's just make a bit of adjustments. And that seems very nice. H1, we can do the font size. So there's a property called font size. And here we can do two things. First of all, one thing you can have is there's different units, right? You can do pixels like 500 pixels, or there's also percentages. So percent, if you do 300%, it's going to be 3 times bigger, and that seems about right. So if we save and reload, that seems a bit better. And yeah, great. So that's all we're going to do today. You can see that for the end of the class, we're basically just going over a bunch of CSS more properties. So as I said, CSS has hundreds of them. If you really want to learn web development, you will eventually find the ones you want. Chances are, if you want to do something, there probably is, right? If you want something to be horizontally aligned, you can do that and whatever. Okay, for the people that need help, you can join the Q&A part. And yeah, because that's the best way you can help you, so I can just talk to you directly. But yeah, I hope you learned something from the past something classes. This is basically the last programming-ish class, right? The next one would be more about like what to do next, probably, and how to put your website on the internet and everything like that. Also, you remember my website, right? TonyJohn.net. If you go there, on the first link is YouTube for the people that can't watch YouTube. My YouTube channel is about programming. It's a bit more advanced than this class, of course, but there's a few pretty nice videos that I think you can look at. I also have a web design introduction course on there. So yeah, I'm just going to end this right now. If anybody that needs help with anything, right? If you miss a class and don't know what the last class is about or everything else, you can all just join again and I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. So see ya.